3, 2.
I got everybody pregnant with Barry Katz and semen.
I'm not comfortable with the tone this is taking.
If you're undeniable, you will not be denied.
If you want to be successful in show business, you get yourself a Jew white manager like Barry Katz.
Being a manager is just turning no's into yeses.
Creating holy shit moments. Undeniable.
You're fucking firing me up, Katz.
I love this man.
Is there anything else I should know?
You're on. What? Now I'm on the air. Barry Katz back in the house. Let's do this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, a long time coming. Probably 35 years. Could be more, could be 40. This is a great honor for me. Please welcome my guest today, Terre Weisman.
Hi, Barry. Nice to be here.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It is awesome. It's great.
When did I first meet you? How many years ago?
Oh, my God. We're going back to definitely the early 80s. You were running the club in Boston. I was an open micer. You had no idea who I was, which was better. And, I was coming to do open mics, and you were always running around, doing your thing, grabbing. There was a stairwell in Played Against Sam's or something where we go downstairs, but there was a closet at the bottom of the stairs, and you were looking for microphones and equipment, and
Turned into the dressing room later on.
Yeah. It was great, but that's how far back it's been.
Where were you coming from to do the open mics?
I was driving down to from New Hampshire to do open mics every night, and back then it was you had to wait in line, you had to sign up on things. By the time I got to your club, I think you were able to phone it in, and they would make a list. But in the old days with was at the Ding Ho and Comedy Connection, you'd have to get there in the afternoon and sign up and then wait all day, see where your spot was, see what was going on. It was a different time. Comedy in Boston back then was, I don't know, it was invigorating, it was exciting, it was new. Maybe it was because we were all younger. Was that it? Could that have been it?
That could have been it. So you how did you decide you wanted to do stand-up comedy? Like, what was happening in your life at the time?
Well, I was always a fan of comedy. It was always in our home. My father had a great sense of humor, and I had all the comedy albums, Woody Allen, Bob Newhart, you name it, Cosby.
And your dad used to play the albums.
My dad didn't play the albums, but he had a great sense of humor. So when I started bringing home the albums, we would listen to them, and he got it. He had it, But I was really listening to it, and I had another buddy of mine, and we'd listen to Cheech and Chong and all the albums.
Out of all the comedy albums, what was your favorite before you started doing stand-up?
Woody Allen. He had a 2-album set of all his stuff, and it was when you said that, I just remembered something so subtle, like where he talked about how he had that voice where he talked like this. Yeah.
And he said, I went to school every day, and I'm paraphrasing, and there was a bully, and the bully beat me up every day. And then one day I decided to stand up to the bully. And I said, hey, you don't do that anymore. I spent the summer in a wheelchair.
I remember that line. And he had such great routine. He was such a great comedy writer. The routine with the moose, and, and then going to the Halloween party. He said, went to the Halloween party, and there was a contest at the end of the night, and there was a married couple dressed as a moose, and they won. But the real moose was there.
I remember the line. He had a line in the middle of the moose thing. So I bring the moose to the party. The moose scored.
Yeah. So we had all the albums, and we listened to it, and I really had a taking for it. And then a friend of mine called me, I think it was 79 or so, and the Ding Ho had opened. I'm sure you.
The Ding Ho was the most legendary comedy club in the Boston area. It was in Inman Square, Cambridge, and that's where I did one of my first open mic nights on an open mic that Lenny Clark, a very, very talented and amazing comedian to this day who could make anything funny, and he was a huge draw in Boston. He had a Wednesday night open mic. It was $3 to get in, and some of the greatest comedians went on. And the way they did the open mic is a lot of times they'd alternate the best comedians in the city with young comedians doing 5 minutes. So you'd have to follow like Don Gavin or Steve Sweeney or DJ Hazard, or who was DJ Hannard back then.
Yeah, he ran the door at DJ Hannard, and then he
yeah.
changed his name to DJ Hazard.
Yeah, Jack Gallagher and just these amazing people. And then Martin Olson, who's an incredibly talented writer and producer here in Hollywood, was the piano player. I remember one time, I was doing pretty well as an open micer, and Lenny was late, and they asked me to host a show. And it was one of the most disastrous things in my life, because I went on and I completely bombed, because it was like a local hangout, and it's like they knew everything that I did.
Yeah.
And when Lenny showed up, it was like thank God he showed up to host
take over. Yeah,
because it was like one of those things where you're a sub on a basketball team, and you come in, you turn the ball over 4 times or something like that. It was one of those things, and you don't get back in the game for a while.
I agree. But Barry Crimmins was very nice to me. I was going there for a year watching. I'd go every weekend. I saw Stephen Wright, everybody. I was there when Kenny Rogerson first got to town. He blew the doors off. He was so
Kenny
good.
Rogerson, and I'm sorry in advance, everybody, for sharing bits of these people from the beginning, but I'm like a savant when I remember this stuff. One of my favorite bits that Kenny Rogerson would open
might be
with,
the same as mine.
and he said something to the effect like, I had a bad day today. A couple of things happened. I was driving this afternoon. I hit a lake. You gotta be pretty f***ed up to hit a lake, and then he says, I got out of the lake, and then I hear this guy screaming in the middle of the lake, help, help, and he must not have needed me, because he stopped after a while.
I remember that joke like yesterday, and I remember seeing him do it. I remember.
And then he kept going, and he said, and then I found out my girlfriend died. I had to go down to the morgue. I had to identify the body. They pulled out the drawer. She pops up with a sheet. She says, Kenny, surprise, happy birthday. And then the tag is, I can't believe I fell for that 2 years in a row.
I remember that exact bit. And I remember going there, and I remember talking to Barry, and I kept saying, gee, I really want to try it. He says, come on up, I'll put you up. We want people to come up. We want you to try it. And then I forget what happened, but my first open mic was actually at the Comedy Connection, because I called them to get on the list, and instead of driving all down to get on the list at the Ding Ho, the Comedy Connection called me. So it happened to be my first night. And you remember, he just passed away a few years ago, Jimmy Smith.
Yes, Captain Brofather.
Yes, he was the host that night. He was very nice to me. And I remember getting up on stage, and it is nothing like you think it's going to be. It's nothing what you hoped it would be your first time up. You are up there alone. It's a really challenging thing, but it's addicting if you really love comedy and you want to pursue it. It's a very addicting thing, and I remember going up.
How did it go?
I got a couple of laughs, but here's the strange thing, because I recorded every show I ever did from the first one on, and this is a story I like to tell often, but I didn't bring up any cards. I never brought up any notes. I worked hard to, remember my 10 minutes, and you only needed 3. And I remember I lost my place, and I went blank, and I'm standing there. To this day, I still swear I was standing there with nothing to say, probably with my mouth open for at least a minute and a half. I swear. And I was sick over it. I finally regrouped. I made fun of myself, and I got going again. And I remember driving home in the car, and I didn't want to listen to the tape. It was my first time up, and I said, I got to listen. I got to see. And I put the tape in, and to this day, I cannot find that gap where I thought I didn't say anything for a minute and a half. That's how different it is to be on stage, as you know. I don't know. I thought I went blank, and I didn't.
And when was the first time you crushed?
The first time I crushed, I crushed is a pretty tough word. If I had crushed, I'd probably still be doing comedy. Let's put it that way. But I had a few good nights, and one night was with you. Zito and Bean were hosting.
Zito and Bean were a comedy team, and they hosted Sunday nights before Anthony Clark took over.
Yeah. And Steve Sweeney used to do your open mic shows, I think. It was, I don't know, I did so many open mics in the beginning, as you know. So, but Zito and Bean were there. I did very well that night, very well. And then I had a few good nights at the Ding Ho, too. I had some very good nights. And Lenny was always very nice. He hosted the open mics a lot of times. He was very nice to me, too. They were all very good. Everybody was really nice until Stephen Wright made it on The Tonight Show. And the atmosphere, in my opinion, in Boston changed because everybody said, oh, we can really be successful at this. And it got a little more competitive over the next year or two. Because everybody used to come and praise you and help you and say, you should twist the line here. As soon as Stephen Wright made it, in my own opinion, nobody was doing that anymore.
Wow, that's interesting.
I don't know if you found that. Did you feel that at all when Stephen made it on the Tonight Show?
I don't remember that. I remember, well, when Stephen made it, I remember dragging a huge heavy-set television, down into the basement, and I had the Tonight Show on that Friday night. The television wasn't back, and Jay Charbonneau was hosting. I had him stop the show, and the crowd watched the Tonight Show on this television with rabbit ears there. I'll still never forget that. So Terry, the reason why we're here, and the audience should know this, there's many different reasons in my mind, but the main reason we're here is not for the reasons that you think we're here. You're here because you're 68 years old. You started as a stand-up comic 40 years ago or more.
Yes, I did.
It didn't work out the way you wanted it to. You had to regroup your life. You always wanted to be in the entertainment business. You always wanted to write and direct and produce great stories and great films. And we're here because you're in Hollywood because your film, Max Dagan,
Our film. Barry, don't be so modest.
A film that Terry wrote and produced and directed, is closing the LA Dances with Films Film Festival this week in its world premiere. And when you have a film that's closing or opening a festival, it's a huge, huge deal. And I'm talking to a guy that is 68 years old and is accomplishing his dream, a movie with, Michael Madsen and Rob Morrow and Zach Gordon, the lead in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Jay Mohr, Kirk Fox from Jury Duty and Reservation Dogs, Jeff Ross, and so many other talented actors and actresses who you might not know but are incredible. And you're here. I mean, it's like everybody who listens or watches this podcast, they're thinking, they might be in their 20s or their 30s or maybe their 50s, and they're thinking, okay, the people that are in the business, not the ones who aren't in the business, they're thinking, am I going to make it? Am I going to be able to accomplish my dreams? Are things going to happen? And you have been sticking with it for all this time, and it's happening. And this is like I presume is like one of the greatest moments of your life.
It truly is, and making it, I guess, is an independent evaluation from anybody, okay? What is making it, and what, it's not always about the money. It's not about fame. It's about doing what you love and finding it. And I want to back up with you a little bit, because the comedy, that was a regret in my life, not doing the comedy. The regret in my life is that I never wanted to give up the paycheck. And so I was trying to do comedy while I had a full-time job. And that was not fair to myself or my dream of comedy, even though I thought, you start to get a family, how life just keeps going. So I didn't really suffer for my comedy, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I didn't put everything I had into the comedy, and when it didn't work out for me, I only had myself to blame, and it always stuck with me. It was like something stuck inside my throat, and it's been a regret. And then my life really turned around when it's kind of strange to say it this way, but when my marriage was falling apart, I was making my second feature film.
Your first marriage.
My first marriage. And I was making my second feature film during that turmoil. And after
Don't lose your place. Why was your marriage falling apart? Was it because you were working too hard? Was it because you weren't putting the attention towards that? Was it because of her? Was it a combination
Well, I
of
don't want to point fingers, because in a marriage it takes two. But it all started with a phone call that nobody wants to get, and it just went downhill from there. And I tried to save my marriage.
You got the phone call.
I got the phone call, and I'll leave it at that. And I worked very hard to try to save that marriage, and it wasn't working out. And at the time, I was in production of a second independent feature film I was making.
You should send her a fruit basket now, thanking her for the phone call.
I have a wonderful woman in my life.
That's
now,
right,
as
you do.
know. And but during that time, I was in the car business, because when I was doing comedy, I started selling cars, and I didn't want to give up that paycheck, so I never invested in myself the way.
Did you roll back the odometers?
No, we didn't do that. I try to be live an honest life, but thank you for saying that. But so at that time, so now I'm getting divorced, and as you know, I have two boys, but I had a choice to make. I could continue to stay in the business, and I said, something, if this part of my life had fell apart, not too many times do you have an opportunity to fix a regret. And the regret was I didn't give all myself to my creative side and my creative needs. And I was writing all that time, and we can talk about that in a minute. I always wrote. I was always spending time. I rented an office outside the home so I could write on nights and weekends.
And what kind of things were you writing? Were you writing screenplays, books, half hours?
I was writing screenplays at first, and I had a bunch of screenplays, and I don't know how good or bad I was getting, but...
Who taught you the structure of how to write a screenplay?
All self-taught. My first book I bought Sid Field's screen.
Of course.
Yeah.
Anybody listening, that's required reading. It's a small book, but it is a tough read. It's a tough read,
yeah.
But it's required.
And I was pounding away, and I was getting a little better at these scripts. And you can get the format down, you can learn that, but the stories and the dialogue you have to work on. So I was doing that, and this is all while I was still married before the axe fell. And we have a mutual friend, Billy Martin.
Billy Martin has been the executive producer, I believe, of Real Time with Bill Maher.
Yeah.
He was a comic from Pittsburgh. He was a thin comic, and I always remember he used to wear this Red Sox jersey on stage.
It's a funny bit. Yeah.
And he said, I got this Red Sox jersey, but I'm too small. And now it just, people look at it, it says Ed So.
I remember that bit. And so I got friendly with Billy. He was living nearby, and we said, why don't we write a screenplay together? I mean, a sitcom together. So I dropped the screenplays, and I started writing a sitcom with Billy.
And this is when he was working on an incarnation of a Bill Maher show?
No, he didn't leave for California yet. He was still living in Revere. and I would go to his house, my computer.
And he was also submitting and getting jokes on the Tonight Show.
Yes, he was a faxer, they called him.
Yeah.
He was sending faxes into Jay Leno and getting his jokes on there. He's a great joke writer, obviously. Look at the career he's had. And so we wrote this screenplay, and then this sitcom. And then at that time, he decided to leave his family and come out here to California and see what he could do. And he did very well right away, and he brought his family out. And he had some management. And I asked you last night, Brezhnev.
Mohr Brezhnev.
Yeah, so
those were Robin Williams and Billy Crystal's managers.
And I think he gave them the sitcom we wrote, and they gave him some good advice, even though it was a shot in the face. He said, "This doesn't matter. You need a talent attached to it. And if your friend wants to do sitcoms, tell him to write a bunch of spec scripts." And the spec scripts you can explain to the audience.
Yeah, spec script is something that's well, there's two things that you need to write in half-hour television, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure everybody has an opinion of something, but you write a spec script, which is, I mean, to me, technically speaking, you have his original pilot that he did, which you need, so people can see how you're writing.
Yeah.
And they also need your spec script where you pick, whatever you feel your lane is best. If it's multi-camera kind of writing, or if it's half-hour writing, if it's dramedy, comedy, you want to pick a show and you want to write an episode of that show knowing what you know about the characters. And so when you submit it to people, they say, wow, this guy really nailed the characters and knows how to write for characters.
And they
but
can
then
hear
they
the
also,
voice, because the person can hear the voice that you're writing, because they know the show.
And then they'll also back it up by looking at your at your original script to see, okay, can this guy write on his own without this? And then you can get hired as as they say, a baby writer, a first-time writer. But the salary is probably these days between $4,000 and $5,000 a week.
So Billy left for here, and we were done kind of partnering. He was getting his work and doing his thing, and I set off and I wrote about a dozen spec scripts. There were some Seinfelds I wrote, some news radio, and some Wings. And I wrote all these spec scripts, and I started flying back and forth out here, trying to get some representation. And I was getting close, and a few guys that some of your competitors, that Billy knew, hooked me up with. And then it dawned on me, I was coming home, and I just had a newborn baby. And I said to myself, wait a minute, my wife isn't going to want to pack up and come out here, and I don't want to raise my kids out here because I don't know this area. So I stopped that, and I just went back to writing screenplays, and that's when I wrote that. But when I did that, I said to my wife, I said, look, I'm writing all these screenplays. If I took a little money every week and saved it, would you mind if I spent it to make a film someday with one of these screenplays, as long as it doesn't affect our lifestyle? And she was great, and she said, no, just save the money. So 6 or 8 years later, I had my first script, and I decided to make my first film.
Now, the first film that you decided to make, I don't believe that was your first script you ever wrote. Well, how did you?
Oh no, definitely.
Yeah. So how did you decide out of? I think you'd written multiple scripts at that point in time.
Many.
How did you decide which one was the one you wanted to make?
Well, I was writing by then about 10 years, and I had 10 years worth of other scripts, but I decided to focus on this one because it felt like my voice. It felt right. It felt what I always hoped I would have got with comedy. If I stayed with it, I would have found my voice, and you just kind of know it's your voice. And
so tell the audience about that film and what that was about, and how you, how much money you had, and how you went about making your first movie independently, because a lot of people listening and watching this want to know how to start that process, make it happen, put some money away.
Well, I had, after saving, I think it was about 8 years now, it was about 92, 93, where I asked her if we could save some money, and I was putting away more than I was telling her I was putting away, a little bit, not a lot, but a few $100s extra here and there. And believe it or not, I ended up having more money than I ever had in my life, which was about $75,000 or $80,000. And then I said to her, I said, remember you said I could spend this money to make a film? I said, well, this, and she goes, oh my God, okay. So I found someone, an actor friend of mine who knew a producer who was coming back home to New England. And I called the guy, I met with him, and I gave him the script. And the first thing he said to me, I said, I want to make this film. He says, okay, I'll help you make it, but I just have one question for you. Do you have the money? Because everybody wants to make. I said, yeah, I do. Here it is. And I just jumped in with both feet.
So $80,000, and the producer said we can make this feature film.
He said we can make this feature film, right. And then it turned out, as we all know, the budget increases a little bit, so I grabbed a little bit more money out of our household savings, another 10, with her permission. I never did anything without asking my wife.
Okay, so tell the audience what the film is about, and tell the audience how now you got the producer who's going to help you with the cameras and everything. Is he directing it too?
No, I was going to be the
You were
director.
going to direct it.
He was just going to
So
produce.
how did you learn and know how to direct a feature film?
It's funny you should say that, because I didn't. And I made this film for 3 reasons. I made it because I said, first of all, I want to see if I could make a film. I wanted to see if I would like it. And I also wanted to see if I'd be any good at it. And so I jumped in with him, and I put casting notices out, and I produced it with him. You know, I did a lot of the legwork, and he was putting together a small little crew.
Casting in New Hampshire and Boston and New York?
In New Hampshire. I was casting in New Hampshire.
So you're casting actors in how many actors are there in New Hampshire?
You know, it's surprisingly, because I think casting is one of my things I'm very good at, because I think I know what I want, and I think I can read, and I appreciate actors more than anything because it's something I cannot do. And so when I see actors act, I really can appreciate it. So I rented a little room in a hotel, and we put out notices. It was a lot different than today when they do audition tapes. And the film was a love story. It was this guy who was getting married to somebody, but one of his best friends was a girl, and the girl that he was marrying stood him up at the altar, and the girl that was his best friend, they ended up kind of falling in love together, but he ended up passing away. So it was kind of a sad story. But when I was casting,
That was your voice. That's what you're saying you thought was
the
closest to your
drama
voice.
was my voice, even though I love comedy.
You were a comedy guy.
My second film, we'll talk about that, was comedy. But I did a drama, and I said, this feels right to
But
me.
it wasn't even dramedy. It was a drama.
It was drama, but it did have some comedy in it. But it was through the dialogue and the characters. It was a Jewish family and a lot of Jewish kind of humor, and it was called Developing Sheldon, because he enjoyed cameras and stuff, and he was changing as a person. But the casting process, I cast 2 people. One of them is Ryan Gall. He's out here with the Groundlings right now. He's had an unbelievable career. He was in what's the movie that Tracy Morgan had, the original OG or something?
The TV show is the
Yeah,
original.
so Ryan was in that. He was a lead. He was the husband of the wife that lived there, and he's done a lot of pilots, and you know pilots don't get picked up, but Ryan was fantastic. And then the little girl I cast in there is now JoJo LeVake, the singer and songwriter. She blew me away in the audition. I love the audition process. It was just magnificent. So we went off and made this film, and the story I'm going to tell you about this. So the first day, I didn't know what you should do first and this and that, and the producer put it all together. We had it was a tape at the time, not cheap little video. It was the latest technology, but it wasn't film. And so the first day, and because I was in the car business, I borrowed an RV from another company, and I had locations and businesses, local businesses, bar rooms were giving me locations. And the first day of filming, we're in front of my house. We needed to do a car scene, and we didn't have, the right equipment. So I borrowed a trailer from a landscaper that I knew, and we pulled the car up on the trailer, we locked it down, we put the cameras on there and everything, and I got a truck from the dealership I was working at that had a little cab, and they had all the wires going from the trailer into the back of the truck, and they threw me in the back, and I'm all curled up like this with my little monitor. Never did a film before, and I yelled action, and we started driving, and we were starting to make a film. And looking back on that, I should have been so scared and afraid, and it felt so natural, Barry. It was really that I kind of said, I need to be doing this. This is, I just felt right. It felt like I have done it. I did it before, and I never yelled action in my life until that moment. And
So tell our audience, this is something that happens all the time. When you're doing your first film, you have to create continuity because you're not shooting in order.
that's right.
And so you normally have a script supervisor who's helping you
Yes.
with the continuity, and they'll say to you, hey, listen, remember that scene here where he's supposed to do this, and then you did that, and that cup is there, and whatever. And then when you get in the editing bay after you shoot all the film, you're like, oh my God, this doesn't match up here. I'm gonna have to do some transition here. Maybe I'll do a transition shot of just the neighborhood, and then I'll go into here. So tell our audience the things that you had to do once you got the film in front of you, where you're like, oh my God, how am I gonna make this transition work? That's up there. I messed up this. I did that. What?
Yeah, there were some mess ups there, but we were able to edit out of it. Like you said, if you need, because most of the shots you take, you need something to cut to or to cut away from so you can cut back. So, we went out afterwards and did a few pickup shots and things like that with the camera and a slight crew. And we just made it work. And the editor just happened to be somebody who came from California to move back to New Hampshire because his wife wanted to come to New Hampshire. I met him as our kids were going to preschool, and I heard that he was an editor. And so I went and introduced myself. He ended up living right down the street from me. So after I'd shoot for 12 hours a day, I'd stop by his house and see how the editing's going. I'd give him dailies, and if he told me something I needed, I'd try to get it the next day, or you waggle this, or you make that location look like something you had before the 3 days before. You know how that works.
So what's your next step after that? You finish the film, it's done, and now what's your next goal?
My next step on that film was to submit it to some festivals. So the first two questions I was able to answer myself. I said, okay, I think I can do this, and I do enjoy it. And I couldn't answer for myself whether I was any good at it because the audience needs to decide. And I submitted it to some festivals, and I got into the New Hampshire Film Festival, which is a pretty good festival today even, and I won Best Feature.
Hey everybody, it's Barry Katz, and I wanted to talk to you about Blueprint for Success. This is a community that I put together during the pandemic to help all artists of every walk of life in the entertainment business. No matter where you are in that part of this journey, it's designed to help you. There are podcasts with people that will inspire you, like Kevin Hart, Judd Apatow, Bill Burr, that you can't find anywhere else but on this program that I've interviewed, to times where we get to talk to executives in the business that you would never have access to tell you what you need to hear and to answer your questions, to all sorts of different videos and master classes designed to help you get to the promised land. That's what the Blueprint for Success is. Doesn't matter whether you want to be a stand-up comedian, a sketch performer, a podcaster, an actor, an actress, director, writer, social media person, whatever you want to be. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've had the honor and been humbled to represent people like Chappelle, Wanda Sykes, Louis C.K., Dane Cook, and probably over 20 other people who went from a studio apartment to being a multi-millionaire and a household name. And I want that for you, and I wanted to take the time with this program to be able to help you on your way there, to get there and to heighten and increase the trajectory of your career. Blueprint for Success is the way to go. I'm proud to be a part of this program, and I'd be proud to have you to be a part of it too.
On that
Holy
film. And I said, whoa, okay, well, maybe I am good at this. This is better than being the stand-up.
You won Best Feature.
I won Best Feature in 2001, New Hampshire Film Festival. It was a highlight of that whole thing.
And normally when you win a festival and you start submitting to others that see that you won one, normally there's momentum. Was there momentum or no momentum?
There was no momentum. I applied to that. There were two festivals. I won Best Feature and Best Drama or another. I might have gotten confused. Maybe it was Best Drama at New Hampshire Films. I forget which one, but there were two festivals, and I won Best Feature and Best Drama in each of them. The first two festivals I applied to. I hope we have that luck with Max Dagan.
Well, you're already in a festival.
But I learned a lot on that, and that film was my film school. I didn't know. I thought it would make a great Hallmark movie, and I still think it might. And I'm rewriting that script now because I've made some connections out here that have Hallmark connections. It's that kind of movie.
Hallmark movies, just so you know, they're like $1 million budgets, and they make like, God knows, 6 a year, 12 a year. As an actress that I work with, Ash Tsai, who has done 2 of them already, the leads, and they're very popular.
Yeah, so I've made some connections. So I'm rewriting that script now, and I have the movie to show them if they don't want to read the script. It'll need to be updated. But that was my film school, and I made a lot of mistakes in there, but it's okay. I won some awards. I didn't save enough money in the budget to do a lot of original music, so I couldn't sell that film. I realized afterwards. In some of the scenes, there were some logos that we didn't get clearance on. My producer was supposed to take care of that, but I didn't know because it was my first film. And so a lot of reasons why that film would never sell anyways, but I learned so much on that film, it got me ready for my second film.
Got it. And just take us through your next project.
So the next project was, I said, okay, I got that out of my system, but let me go back to my comedy roots and let me write a comedy. So I spent a few years working on a few story ideas and writing comedy. And then I got this idea. I was in the car business, and I wrote a comedy about the car business. And I will say this is just my opinion, my humble opinion is comedy is much more difficult than drama, because comedy has to be funny on the page, and then it has to be performed funny as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to carry itself right through the audience, in my opinion. But I think I made a great film. It was called The A-Plate. And I had a larger budget then because I was earning a little more money, and my wife at the time realized I could make a movie, and I knew what I was doing. So, but that came at a time in my life where the rest of my personal life was falling apart. And that got me to Max Dagan, actually, because I said, well, if I can make that movie, my second movie, during one of the worst times of my life, then can I imagine what I could do if I dedicate myself totally to it, to making film? And I don't want to jump too far ahead of you, but I will say that after I made the A-Plate, and that won some awards, that won the Indie Spirit Award in the Boston International Film Festival, and it also did pretty well. The funny thing about that is I was watching The King of Queens a lot, and I saw on The King of Queens is Sam McMurray, who's a character actor. He's one of my favorite, and he's so funny. And I know I needed some names, but at that budget, you can't get a big name.
Your second budget was what?
My second budget was, what was the second budget? Second budget was $250, I think. And I sold some personal thing. I did everything I could to get that money together. We spent a year trying to raise money, and raising money on a film is just about impossible, at least coming from New Hampshire. Maybe around here it's easy. So I self-funded a second film, because I always believe if you're not going to invest in yourself, who's going to invest in you? You have to invest in yourself in everything you do. It's just my own personal belief. So I spent the money.
So you finished that film. What happens with that film? What do you do?
I went to the festivals. I did that, and we got a lot of calls on distribution. But again, everything we do in life seems to be a learning process. And and you don't get any success without failure. Well, we found a distributor, and we were excited, and we signed up. It was a 7-year agreement and a tiny little advance, but not much. And then we couldn't get one report from him. We couldn't get any details on how the film was selling. And you know,
So he took the money and
I don't even know if it made money. We don't know. He wouldn't respond. He ended up going bankrupt, and it took me a little extra money to get that out of his control, this film. But by then I was on to something else, and I chalked it up as another lesson learned, an expensive lesson, but a lesson learned.
wow. And comedy is interesting when you're. This is one of the things, the hardest things I feel like when you're screening a film. You screen a drama, you're watching the drama with the audience. I mean, you have no idea whether it's going well or it's not going well.
No.
You have no understanding of what's happening. You have a comedy, you know right away if it's doing well or not doing well. So when you screened the A plate, were people laughing the way you wanted them to, or was it like you were like, that didn't get the laugh I thought it would?
Sometimes it didn't get the laugh I thought it would. Sometimes I got a laugh where I didn't think I would. And 60% of the time I got the laughs where I wanted the laughs. So I was pretty content with that. I said, okay, my first time out doing a comedy, which I still think is very hard to do. But I was happy with the film, but I wasn't. It led me to different decisions with our Max Dagan film. And the decision was, when I did that film, I had the script, I was ready to film, and everybody kept telling me, The Hangover had just come out when I did that film. And they said, you've got to add more things in this script that are more kind of sexual innuendos and things like this. So I added things in that script that were not really my voice or my personality, and I was doing it to try to gauge the market, because everybody was telling me, well, if you're going to compete against The Hangover, and who's going to compete against The Hangover? It was one of the biggest comedy hits ever. So I added things in that script, and so when the film just did okay, and I got messed up with the distributor, I walked away from that with another lesson learned, which is anything else I do now has to be totally my voice. Because it's hard enough to be successful, as you know, in this business, and especially with film. And I said, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to be able to swallow it a little better as long as I know everything came from me. It was my own voice. But when the A plate didn't do as well as I had hoped, it's easy to say, well, if I didn't put that in, what could it have done? If I did my own voice, if I followed my true feelings about my own script, I could deal with that a little easier. But I didn't, and it was a regret, and I'll never do that again. Never.
And so moving on to Max Dagan, which stars Michael Madsen and Zach
Dagan.
Gordon and Rob Morrow, and also some appearances by Jay Mohr and Kirk Fox.
Yes,
and
wonderful appearances by them.
And just I don't know. It's just every time I watch a screening of it, there's something about it that just, I don't know. It really touches me. And there's also some great appearances from some actresses who you might not know who are amazing, which Terry will probably talk about. And if you want to talk a little bit about them now, because you cast them, and so
The casting process on Max Dagan was great. First of all, I went into Max Dagan with much more confidence, and again, I think we know each other well enough that I can say this, but I wouldn't even have been out here without your advice. And if I can back up a little bit, Barry, I just want to say that while I'm doing all this writing, I have tons of books that I've read on directing. I've had tons of books I've read on producing. I have tons of books that I've read on screenwriting.
Are there certain books that you can recommend to people here that you believe in tremendously that helped you, or do you remember any of them?
And I don't remember them, but I had to do, somebody asked me to speak at a school once, and I said, I did a slideshow, and I took all these books off my shelf, and my screenplay books stood on a chair like this high. in my producing book stood like to say, could I remember one specific one? No, because once you get going, but I'm constantly learning. But one of the things I did more so, and this is after the A Plate, and I'm moving on to another film, which was eventually Max Dagan. I would go for a walk every day, and I'd always listen to a podcast, and a few different podcasts, but most of them were yours because they were not just famous people or people you know or other comedians. They always had a business side to it. Obviously, the industry standard is an industry podcast. And I would learn so much, and I said, gee, I know Barry from when I was doing comedy. I know he doesn't remember me, but if I ever have a chance to do another film, this is the first person I'm going to reach out to. I don't know if you would want to talk to me, if you'd even remember me or whatever. And so I remember that in my head all the time. And when I was getting ready to do Max Dagan, again, we learned from our mistakes. I said, I'm going to reach out to somebody who knows a lot of people who can give me some advice. And when I first reached out to you, I was ready to just pay you. If you look back in your emails, I was just looking to get one sit-down appointment with you. I just wanted to talk with you, reconnect a little bit. And then you told me about your Blueprint for Success program. And you said, this is what I'm doing now. And I said, sign me up. And we started having meetings and Zoom, and you really encouraged me, kept me on track, and I wouldn't have been out here without your advice. So I thank you. And I'm not blowing smoke. I want to tell everybody, I'm not. This is sincere. I'm telling you, sincere.
One of my favorite stories about my life and the Blueprint is that, when you start doing something, I don't know what you call it, where it's not your main gig. It's not something that you do, you're trying to do something to help people in your spare time. You're setting up appointments where Terry, it's like 11 o'clock at night where he is. It's 8 o'clock at night where I am.
Yeah.
Because I always, try to work on the Blueprint at night or on the weekends or whatever, so I can, be of service to artists.
Yeah.
So I meet with Terry, and he tells me about Max Dagan and how it's, he's 11 years or 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
He's been saying he's going to make this film. He put money aside to make it. And we'd have these great meetings. I read the script. I loved the script. A drama. Some twists and turns that were fascinating. And every time we'd finish a meeting, he'd say, all right, Barry, I'm fired up. I'm going to make this. Just let me get my ducks in a row. And then we'd meet again, and I'm like, how did, everything go, getting your ducks in a row? I'm still working on it, but I don't know what's going to happen. People are telling me that I really shouldn't do it, and I'm just maybe should take some time and think about it, whatever. And then I'd spend the whole hour psyching him up, getting him ready, and be like, all right, I'm fired up, Barry. Let me get my ducks in a row. And then by the fifth meeting, when he said, let me get my ducks in a row, I think I might have said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think I might have just lost it a little bit. I said, listen, pal, I am the fucking ducks.
You did.
I'm the ducks.
You did.
I can help you get this done. And I said, I don't want to meet with you, our last meeting, alone. I don't want to do it. Have your wife, Tanya, come on the call. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but you said something to the effect of, you want my wife on the phone? I mean, what? I mean, there's this money that I'm putting in the film. Yeah, you're taking a chance, Barry. Maybe she might want to, renovate the house or something like that or whatever. I said, I'll take the chance.
Yeah.
And I met with you and Tanya.
On Zoom. I remember it.
And I made my pitch for you to make this movie
Yes, you did.
and take the chance and come out here and do it.
Yes, you did.
And there was like a pause. It was like this thing where there was this tension. You could cut it with a knife, and waiting for, Tanya to say what she thought. And I again, this is how I remembered it. She looked at me and she looked at you and she said, Terry, I've been married to you for about 10 years now, and I've been hearing what a great writer you are and what a great director you are and how fantastic. But I've never seen it. You've never shown me anything.
Yeah.
And this is your passion. This is your dream. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but go out there and make that film.
Exactly.
And a month later, we rented an apartment for you, and you were out here casting.
I was out here ready to go.
And I think that's impressive. And the people, you know, that you cast, were some great. What I remember is certain roles that didn't require necessarily a household name. And I remember the auditions for like Lisa Romaine and Lindsay Dressback.
Yeah, all wonderful.
And just incredible auditions. Rob Brownstein is it Brownstein?
Brownstein, he goes.
Rob Brownstein.
He'll correct you on that too.
A tremendous actor. And I remember, you know, putting these cameos together of, you know, with Jeff Ross and Jay Mohr and Kirk Fox.
Wonderful cameos.
And then I remember the story, and I hope you don't mind me telling it, because one of the things that you do when you produce it, and just producing this with you along with Static Films with you know, Raffi and Steven and Liana, everybody has a role, you know, when you're working on a film. And in this particular situation, you know, Terry's role is clear. He's the boss. He's got the money. He's the director. He's the final say on everything. And he's got a hand in everything, what he's doing. Raffi, Liana, and Steven are there to help physically produce the movie and creatively, but for the most part, be able to supply Terry with a support group that can get the cameras, the trucks, the locations, the signatures, the craft service, every single thing, the casting director, whatever. And my job is more, and this was more, you know, working with Terry to get out here and get going, and also get some people in the film that, you know, were more household names.
Yeah, absolutely.
And after Terry agreed to do the film, I thought to myself, okay, I got to get some household names in here. And I'll never forget this. I had gotten off the phone with him, and I'm like, I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, who do I know who could play one of these roles really well? And I'm just thinking to myself, and I remember just going to the bank and being at the bank and sitting in a chair, kind of like, oh, you know, waiting for the people. What am I? And I hear this voice that was so recognizable, a friend of mine that I'd known for a long time, Michael Madsen.
Wonderful.
And I go, Michael, I've been trying to reach you. I can't, where have you been? Whatever. He's like, and it was really sad. He said, my son passed away. I've been in rehab for like 3 months. I lost everything. I've just, you know, I'm destroyed by this. I've destroyed my family. And I need to show everybody that I can get back where I need to go. If you have anything at all, I need to be on a set, and I need to prove to people that I can. And I need to prove to myself that I can overcome this adversity that I've gone through with my son. And I said, Michael, I think I have something for you. And essentially said, well, listen, if you have something, let me know. I called you, and you're like, what? And you came out here, and we had lunch with.
Perfect. Yeah, we had lunch with Michael.
At the Sunset Restaurant in Malibu.
It was an unbelievable combination, and it was a great meeting Michael, and I knew he was coming off of a tough time. We shared a lot to talk about at that moment, and if I can share one little story when Michael came, this comes back to when I told you being true to myself with the A plate. So I knew when you mentioned Michael, I knew exactly what role I wanted him for. And I wasn't being stubborn, because you give anything to have someone of Michael's stature in your film. Michael came, he sat down with me right away. He tried to pitch, he wanted to play a different role after he read the script. And I knew I didn't want him for that role. I wanted him for the other role. So I had to spend another 30 minutes convincing him to take the role that I originally had in mind for him, knowing that I could possibly lose him. And that was, again, a test of myself against the A-plate, you know, making changes that I wasn't comfortable with just to get what you want to get. But thank God Michael took the role. He took it graciously.
And Rob Morrow took the other role.
Yeah. And they both knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
It was the casting was perfect in my opinion for what I needed and wanted. Yeah. If I can back up with you for 1 minute, Barry, I just want to say something with Max Dagan. And this is for everybody who listens like I was listening to, but you have to make sacrifices if you want to get what you want. And when I came out of my bad marriage and I was readjusting, I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase the paycheck anymore. This is my dream, but how am I going to do it? And what I did is I downsized my house. I downsized because I knew the paychecks were going to stop. And I got myself to a point to say, can I live at this level instead of being here? Can I live here and be comfortable if nothing more ever happens, just so I could make the film. So I'm very proud of the fact that we got to be Max Dagan, but I made sacrifices to get there too, because again, if you're not going to invest in yourself, you're not going to invest in your craft. It's a mistake I made with comedy. I'll never know whether I could have been good at comedy or not, because I didn't make an investment in it. I was doing it kind of like a hobby, and you can't do that. And so now here we are.
1,
2,
3,
4,
5,
5,
6.
6 degrees of separation.
6 degrees of separation. I'm just going to mention some names from the film, and you tell me just a sentence or something that just comes to your mind real quickly, that your impression of them as a person or how they were with you.
Yep.
Jay Mohr.
Jay Mohr, I watched him on Saturday Night Live. I've seen him, you know, especially being a fan of comedy. How can you not reach Jay Mohr? I remember him from all the films he did, or he had a television show. I was a little intimidated when you said you were going to get Jay Mohr. Jay Mohr came. He was the biggest gentleman in the world. He was a giving actor. He gave me some advice that was really good advice while we were on set. He came without any kind of qualms about knowing it was a small role, knowing that you got him without me paying him very much. I was thrilled to have him, but I was also thrilled to meet him. And he's a great guy. And just to carry on from that, he went back out on the road. He's been doing shows and everything. And he said to me on set, he said, Terry, I got something coming up. I'm going to be in Boston doing comedy, but it's probably 8 months out, a year out. He says, I'll call you and let you know I'm coming. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, he's going to think about me. I'm sitting at dinner one night, and I get a text from Jay. Terry, I told you I'm going to be in Boston. These are the nights I'm going to be there. Please come by and see me. And I went. To see his show. I brought my 2 boys. We loved it. We went backstage. He gave me a big hug in front of everybody, which is, you know, blessing. And he also gave me a little comedy shot because he introduced me to somebody else. He said, this is Terry. He just made a $7 movie, you know. You know, with Jay. I loved it. So Jay's a great guy. I love it. And I hope to see him for our screening. Yeah.
Zach Gordon.
Zachary, I didn't realize, and I'm sorry, Zach, if I say this to you now, I didn't realize how popular he was because he attracted a much younger crowd than me. As you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm 68 years old. I wasn't watching Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but he's got a great following, and now I know why. He not only is he a wonderful person and a great down-to-earth kid with his feet firmly planted, and you did a podcast with him, which I listened to, but what a talent he is. And he carried Max Dagan movie for us in such a way that, well, when I saw him do the audition, he did one of the crying scenes. It was one of the sides I gave him. And there were 30 other kids auditioned after him, but I knew he was the one, and I'm so glad he joined our group.
Awesome.
And accepted.
Kirk Fox,
that I knew how funny he could be, but I never saw anything him do any kind of drama. I'm not saying he hasn't done drama and he hasn't been great at it, but I only saw him in funny little roles. And so when we showed up on the set that day, I said hi to him and we talked a little bit, and I talked to him a little bit about his character, but it was a cameo role. And again, I appreciated him being there, and I appreciated you lining it up. He walked in and did his scene and added some lines that are in the film today that he read perfectly from my script. But then he said, can I play around with it a little bit? And we had the time, and he did it. And just for the short moments he's on screen, he was great. He was unbelievable. And I said, this guy, you wouldn't even think he was so funny because he was so good at being dramatic. You know, he played a very tough role.
Rob Morrow.
Rob Morrow was the sweetest guy in the world. We had a Zoom first. And his agents submitted to our casting people that he might be interested in this, send them the script. So I sent him the script, and then he said, Rob wants to meet with you. And I'm like, oh, my God. And here's the thing I think everybody should try to remember. We see these people on TV. We see them in movies. We think we know them, but you don't really know who they are because they're playing a role. But when Rob, we had the Zoom, we Zoomed for 45 minutes. I was just praying when we got on. He said, well, Terry, I really love talking to you. I'll let you know. And then we got word back. He said, Rob loved talking to you, and he'd like us to try to put a deal together, and we did.
Awesome.
Great guy.
Jeff Ross.
I talked to you about this already. Jeff had a little bit more of a cameo role than Kurt got. And when I watched Jeff do that role, I couldn't have imagined that character anything better than what Jeff delivered. He was so natural and so good. It was just incredible. I love Jeff. And a wonderful guy again. And I got to talk to him about comedy. He was a comedy hero of mine in a way. I don't know, I think he's younger than me, but I always feel like we're kind of in the same generation. And just a wonderful guy. Wonderful guy.
Awesome. Mitch Weisman.
Oh, you're going to make me emotional. My brother and I, you couldn't ask for a better brother. You couldn't ask for somebody more supportive. I couldn't ask for a better partner. We always had the same love of this creative field and the thing, although my brother took a different path. We had a tough childhood together. You know, our mother moved out on us. My father raised us, and we had to go live with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And it was always just my brother and I. We were like a team, and he always watched out for me. He always took care of me. And then when my father remarried, and the woman he married had 2 daughters, and they had someone together, we became like the Brady Bunch. But it was always my brother and I that we're together. We're very close, and my brother's a great guy. And I will say one last thing. I never asked my brother to say, oh, please give me some money and help me in finance. My brother wanted to be part of the A Plate when I was getting Sam McMurray. And then when he heard we got Michael Madsen, he said, I want to be part of it. I said, Mitchell, I didn't even get you some of your money back from the A Plate. He says, no, I want to be part of this and this and that. But between you and I, Barry, I think he's always just really been investing more in me than the film.
Your proudest moment in show business.
My proudest moment in show business, I think, probably hasn't arrived yet. I'm hoping that Max Dagan will be my proudest moment. But making Max Dagan is without a doubt, not because it's the latest thing I just did, but compared to all the road I took to get here and all the sacrifices I meant to get here, Max Dagan is definitely my most proudest right now.
Your biggest disappointment in show business and how you used it to fuel yourself to the next level.
My biggest disappointment, I actually have 2. One was early in my life when I didn't pursue comedy and give it my all, because when I didn't make it, I never know if I could have. Because I didn't give everything. And then the second one we did talk about, when I changed my script in the A Plate, that was, and then it was, I was having trouble with it, and I never felt good. I love the film, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't all my voice. It was 95% of my voice, and I added this other stuff because I was gauging the market, and that was a huge disappointment and something I would never do again. I was willing to lose Michael Madsen over that because of that in that film, because I said I'm not going to go against my instincts ever again.
And you just, since I have like 5 minutes left,
Yeah.
before I ask my last question, you talked about the difficulty of what happened growing up with your parents and you. What was that traumatic thing that happened in the beginning? Can you go into a little more detail with that? And how did you overcome that with you and your brother?
Well, I was about 6 years old, I think, when my parents got divorced. And obviously back in those days, the father went to work all the time. My father was carrying 2 jobs, so my mother could keep the house. But my mother wasn't available to us. She wasn't home a lot. We'd come home from school. She wouldn't be home, and we wouldn't know where dinner was coming from and this and that. She wasn't a bad person. She just had her own issues anyways. I just want to say that. But so it was always Mitch and I. And after that, my father was working 2 jobs so she could keep the house because we were in Peabody, which was, newer neighborhoods and this and that. But my father's family was originally from Revere, which is, kind of an inner city kind of place. My mother ended up losing the house anyways. And we had to move in with my grandparents. And we didn't have a really strong bond with my grandfather, but my maternal grandmother we did. And then as soon as we moved in there, my mother left. And she took off, and it was just my grandmother and my father's nightly visits.
You never saw her again?
We saw her, but she moved someplace in town, but, wasn't our mother anymore, so to speak. Biologically she was, but she was never in our lives. She wasn't in our lives. And sometimes she had apartments right in town, and then she moved out and she went and lived her own life. And Mitch and I, when we got older, I was 17 at the time. Mitch was 4 years older than me. We took a trip. She was living in Las Vegas, and we said, well, let's go visit her. And we went to visit her. We were planning to stay, I think, 5 or 6 days at the time. After 2 days, we looked at each other and said, let's tell her we got to leave. Let's just leave. Because there wasn't a strong bond there, and it wasn't a relationship. It was very sad looking back on it. It really was. But again, it was always Mitch and I. We were always together, and he was always kind of watching over me, even at the times when I didn't even realize he was. Maybe he didn't even realize he was. Maybe it was kind of a maternal thing for him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What advice do you have for the young artist who's grown up in an area where men are men and sheep are nervous, and there's not a lot going along, and having a tough childhood, trying to figure out from stand-up comedy that maybe it's not working as well, realizing that maybe there's other crafts that you can go into and how to learn and how to figure things out to have the kind of career and have the life where when you're going towards 70, where you have your world premiere and the closing film tonight at the LA Film Festival, Dances with Films.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What advice do you have for people?
I'll tell you the advice, but I want to tell you it comes out of a joke. And there's this old joke where this man, he spent his whole adult life, he was very religious, and he prayed every night for everything he wanted in life. And at the end of every prayer, he would ask God, would you please let me win the lottery? Just let me win the lottery. And he did that his whole adult life. And he died without ever winning the lottery. And he got up to heaven, and he said to God, God said, well, here you go, you're here. And he says, I just want to ask you something, God. He said, out of all the things I asked you for, I always asked you if I could win the lottery, and I never won the lottery. And God looked at him and he says, well, it would have helped if you bought a ticket. And so that's my advice to everybody. To buy a ticket means invest in yourself. Nobody's going to give you anything, and there are not going to be any guarantees. But go out there and give everything you have, whether it's financial or yourself or your time or whatever, and invest in yourself. Buy the ticket. Buy a ticket, because you're never going to win if you don't. You're not going to get there. You got to work hard. You and I know in comedy, you have to work hard. Jerry Seinfeld talks about it all the time. You have to write every day. Louis C.K., who you represent, you have to write. You have to put your time in. You have to get on stage all the time. If you're an actor, go to auditions. Keep plugging away. Keep doing it. Whatever it is. I was a writer. Writing, you think it's going to be easy. You say, oh, I want to be a writer, and you think you're going to sit there with your pipe, and you think you're sitting in the chair every day, getting your ass in the chair every day, and writing is very difficult. It's not all the joy you think it is. Even when you're doing what you want in life, it's not going to be a blast. So please get out there and please give yourself everything and give yourself the fighting chance in whatever it is you want to do and invest in yourself.
Terre Weisman.
Thank you, Barry.
Man,
This
what a
is
way
great.
to close this one out. Incredible.
This was great. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you
very much, Barry.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
I appreciate you too. Thank you.
All right.